The seventh and final Hermetic principle is gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This is the principle most likely to be misunderstood if taken casually. So let's be precise from the start. The Hermetic claim is not primarily about human biology or social roles. It is a claim about a basic structural polarity found throughout nature, an active, initiating, outward projecting force, traditionally labeled masculine, and a receptive, forming, nurturing force, traditionally labeled feminine, and the claim that creation at every level requires both in relationship, not one operating alone. Genesis itself states this at the human level with unusual directness. Male and female, he created them. Zachar u'nekeva bara otam. Appearing twice in the first two chapters, tied explicitly to the phrase, in the image of God. The classical commentators, including the Midrash, take this to mean something significant. The full image of God on this reading is not fully expressed in a solitary human being of either sex. It requires the pairing. This is not a minor detail tucked into the creation account. It is stated as constitutive of what the image of God even means at the human level. Kabbalah develops this into full cosmological architecture. Among the 10 Sephirot, several are explicitly gendered in the classical literature. Chochmah, or wisdom, is described as a masculine, seminal, initiating force, the flash of insight that precedes articulation. Binah, or understanding, is the feminine principle that receives that flash and develops it, gestates it into structured comprehension. The Zohar plays extensively on Binah's root connection to the word for building and womb. Further down the tree, Ze'e Anpin and Malchut, or the Shechinah, form the central gendered pair of the entire Kabbalistic system. Ze'e Anpin as the masculine configuration of emotional sephirot, Malchut, the Shechinah, as the feminine sephirah of manifest presence, the aspect of God that actually dwells among creation, in the world, in the temple, in exile alongside the Jewish people. The Zohar describes the ongoing spiritual health of the universe in terms of the union or separation of these two configurations. Exile itself is described strikingly as a kind of cosmic separation of the divine masculine and feminine, and redemption as their reunification. This should sound familiar if you've been following the Hermetic principle closely. Creation, on this account, is not the product of a single undifferentiated force acting alone. It requires two poles in relationship, initiating and receiving, giving form and being formed, operating together. Neither pole alone produces anything. This is worth thinking about because it corrects a common misreading of monotheism from the outside. The claim that Judaism's uncompromising monotheism must mean God is thought as a single, undifferentiated, purely masculine or purely simple force. The Kabbalistic tradition insists, rather, that within the absolute oneness of Ein Sof, the process by which that oneness becomes manifest, articulate, and creative, necessarily unfolds through paired complementary forces, without ever compromising the fundamental unity underneath them. Maimonides would frame this far more cautiously, in strictly philosophical rather than mythic language, insisting that all such gendered imagery is metaphor pointing towards processes, never literal description of God's nature, a caution the Kabbalists themselves generally share, even as they build an elaborate technical vocabulary on top of it. The Shechinah deserves particular attention here because she is one of the richest and most emotionally resonant concepts in the entire tradition and deserves to be far better known than she typically is. The word comes from the root meaning to dwell. The Shechinah is the aspect of the divine presence that is near, immanent, felt, as opposed to the transcendent, unreachable Ein Sof. The Talmud describes the Shechinah as going into exile alongside the Jewish people when the temple was destroyed, dwelling with them in their suffering rather than remaining aloof in some untouched heavenly serenity. Kabbalistic literature describes Shabbat itself as a kind of wedding, welcoming the Shekhinah as a bride into the home. The Friday night hymn Lecha Dodi, sung in synagogues around the world today, literally invites the Shekhinah using bridal imagery. Come, my beloved, to greet the bride. This is gender operating at the level of lived, weekly embodied practice, not an abstract metaphysical doctrine confined to esoteric texts, but something ordinary Jewish families reenact in some form every single Friday night. The practical takeaway, and the one that should matter most, whether or not you accept any particular piece of Sephirotic architecture, creative, generative processes of every kind, intellectual, relational, spiritual, tend to require both an initiating force and a receptive force working together, and neither one, functioning alone, produces the same result as the two in genuine relationship. An idea without patient development remains a flash that never becomes real. Development without an initiating spark has nothing to develop. The tradition's insistence on gender as cosmic principle is, at bottom, an insistence that partnership, not solitary self-sufficiency, is built into the deepest structure of how anything comes into being. That completes our tour of the 7 Hermetic principles and their Jewish counterparts. Next time, we step back from mysticism and structure to law itself, the actual relationship between universal law and Torah law, examined in real detail through the Noahide Code and the 613 Commandments, and what the Torah itself says about the moral status of the rest of humanity.